In this third video in the series of conspiracies, hopefully we can get an understanding of the fear that conspiracies promote in order to get people to act contrary to what they would normally do if they were given the full knowledge of the decision. In 1 Chronicles 12, verse 32, mentions David's mighty men. And the children of Issachar, it says, were men that had understanding of the times. And with that understanding, it says, to know what Israel ought to do. And so when you get some understanding about some things, then you can make a proper decision and lay out a proper strategy. Of course, Lucifer has had 6,000 years of experience since Adam to establish a spider web of conspiracies in every area of life. And in Jeremiah 11 and Ezekiel 22, God gave these two prophets knowledge, warned them about conspiracies. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a conspiracy is simply defined to be a combination or confederacy between two or more persons formed for the purpose of committing, by their joint efforts, some unlawful or criminal act. Now that's a pretty good definition, but that doesn't make a dictionary our final authority. I'm going to take that definition, go to the Bible, and I discover that the word conspiracy and its variations are found 30 times in the Bible. In the first occurrence, it was 10 brothers who conspired against Joseph. In the last occurrence of conspiracy, in Acts 23, it was over 40 men who conspired to murder Saul. So this Black's Law Dictionary definition is a pretty good definition, a biblical definition. In the common, ordinary vernacular, in the inner cities, a conspiracy is also called a gang. It's two or more young people who, by their joint efforts, commit unlawful acts. In the political world, it's a conspiracy that's often official, where they have official meetings, secret meetings. In the religious world, there often is just the spirit of the age over the religious leaders, the scholars, the professors, the seminaries, and so forth and so on. Now, the idea of a conspiracy, and if we understand the idea, then we could overcome the fear and intimidation. The idea of a conspiracy is engulfed with the emotion of fear and intimidation. Fear is the motive to counter the exposure of the intents of a conspiracy. Okay, if someone's trying to expose the lies of the conspiracy, fear will be used to dispel this research. The more fame that a person has, the more they fear the accusation. Okay, the media in this day, the media is the main culprit who are seeking to control the narrative of the day. And if someone doesn't, walk in their narrative, then they are going to be branded a conspiracy theorist. This began shortly thereafter of the JFK assassination, when the powers that be authorized the Warren Commission to provide the narrative of the JFK assassination. And after they published the Warren Commission's findings, many people who read them questioned them. They questioned the anomalies and inconsistencies. And then the CIA, in order to dispel that questioning, mentioned, okay, we need to ramp up the idea of a conspiracy theorist to produce fear in order to cover up the research. Okay, it was a response of the CIA to the opposition, and they accelerated this idea through the media industry. You see, the difference between a conspiracy theory and the evidence being made known can range from one day or reading the narrative or many, many years. It depends how vigilant or how diligent a person is to examine their narrative. And we ought to do that. The Bible tells us in 1 Thessalonians 5 to prove all things, hold fast that which is good. And then in 1 John 4, verse 1, it advises the believer to try the spirits. You see, history, in many cases, if not most cases, is nothing more than lies agreed upon by the writers. Okay, the news industry, you cannot believe, I do not believe, anything the news industry publishes politically, including wars or whatnot. They might get some tragic events, some natural disaster might cover some of that properly. But in many cases, you cannot believe anything the media says politically. Okay, fear is the motive to counter the exposure of the intents of the conspiracy. Fear is also the motive to promote the agenda of this conspiracy. Okay, of late, in the last couple weeks, the cartoonist of Dilbert, by the name of Scott Adams, is now facing the conspiracy pressure of the media about the topic of racism. And we'll just see how he handles this situation. And it seems like that he deliberately got this involved in order to get people to think. In the political world, Tucker Carlson of Fox is facing the pressure from the liberal Democrats and the Republicans who are upset because he showed some video footage of the so-called January 6th insurrection. Okay, and it's just amazing how you can see that these people like Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, are charging conspiracy theory. And you can just see how panicked they are. Plus the comedians will get involved. Plus the news media will get involved. And some of them have made asinine statements like that January 6th was the worst thing that happened in America since the Civil War. One of them said it was worse than the Twin Towers coming down. So it's going to be interesting to see if Tucker Carlson keeps exposing the conspiracy of the so-called insurrection of January 6th. I mean, just a very simple observation of the Black Lives Matter protests versus January 6th. Anyone can see that January 6th was a walk in the park. But is this a diversion? Are these diversions away from the evidence that the FBI has just announced that the COVID virus they have discovered came as a result of a leak of a laboratory in Wuhan, where President Trump said that over 2 years ago, and the media said, conspiracy theory. Well, that's what I'm saying. A conspiracy theory can be proven to be a fact if you disagree, if you just read the narrative, or you seek other evidences that's involved with it. So now it's a conspiracy theory that the vaccination is causing injury and death. Okay, but common sense tells you that a toxic chemical put in your body is going to harm the body. A mayor of Chicago in the past, Rahm Emanuel, this dude was in the Clinton administration and then Obama, and who knows where these people land. It's just amazing how they go from one place to another. But good old Rahm said, you never let a serious crisis go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. What if the conspirators create the crisis? Now, this might give you some understanding when you get into the political corporations. Okay, what do I mean by that? Political corporations are really, in many cases, conspiracies. But you have business corporations, okay? So pretty much anybody understands that a business corporation seeks the best in order to make a profit. But in political corporations, which are actually not government, but it's a political corporation like a municipality, like the state of Indiana, uppercase letters, like the United States, uppercase letters, these are corporations. They are not governments per se. They are political corporations, and their intent is not for profit. Their intent is for control. So this is how this works, okay? In the business corporations, the cream rises to the top. In political corporations, remember that sewage floats. And of course, we have the Bible to give us examples of this in many places. And what fascinates me about the Bible is that it's unlimited source of knowledge. And what also surprises me is how man overlooks these unlimited sources of knowledge and how it can apply to every area of life. In 2 Chronicles chapter 13, it mentions the type of people that Jeroboam put into the religious position and a political position. Jeroboam, if you remember the story where the 10 northern kingdoms, split from the 2 southern. Jeroboam took the 10 northern, Rehoboam took the 2 southern. And Jeroboam was afraid that because the Jews were required to go to Jerusalem 3 times in a year, that he was going to lose a bunch of his people. So he conspired, Jeroboam conspired, and this is what Amos exposed in Amos chapter 7. And so he conspired to create a fake religious Judaism. Now, in order to get that accomplished, in 2 Chronicles 13:7, it says, "And there are gathered unto him vain men, children of Belial." Okay, another passage that reinforces that is in 1 Kings chapter 12. "And he made a house of high places and made priests of the lowest of the people." In Ezekiel 29, verse 15, in Ezekiel 26 to 32, there are 7 chapters in a row describing satanic kingdoms. In Ezekiel 29:15, it says, in verse 14 at the end, "And they shall be there a base kingdom." The next verse says, "It shall be the basest of the kingdoms." Okay, in Daniel 4, in the testimony of Nebuchadnezzar, he wrote, or the Lord mentioned here in Daniel 4, verse 27, what kind of people that are usually placed in the federal level or the international level of political structure. And remember that Babylon was the first international king. It says at the end that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. Okay, so how does this work? Okay, let's say a person gets a job at the county level. At the county level, generally speaking, people are trying to take care of the people of the county. Okay, and let's say they got an office in there with 10 or 12 workers in there at the county level, and then somebody higher up, maybe at the state level, is requesting for somebody to move up the ladder. Okay, now in a business corporation, they're going to try to promote the one that helps them make the greatest profits. But in the political corporations, why is it with political corporations we fail to remember it's the land of the free and the home of the brave, where the political corporations need challenge, just as you would challenge a business corporation if they sent you an unlawful bill. But in the political corporations, profit is not the intent. Control is. Control is the intent. So this is why sewage floats, because compromise is the lifeblood of politics. Okay, at the county level, You got maybe 10 or 12 workers there, and somebody from the state office called the one over the 10 or 12 employees and said, would you give us promote somebody up to our area? Now, since profit is not the issue, the natural thing is that, the line of least resistance. So this, do you think this county leader is going to promote their best employee up to the next, state level? No, they're going to get rid of the dead weight. They're going to get rid of somebody who is not pulling the job, somebody who's a pain in the rumpums. They're going to get rid of the worst. And so the worst moves up into the state level. And again, they get in a, environment of 10, 20 or so people. Somebody at the federal level was seeking, an employment. And so they asked somebody at the state level, would you send somebody up to the federal level? Again, profit is not the motive. Making your life easier is the motive. And so they'll send up to the federal level the dead weight. And this is why we get somebody like the actor-in-chief. This is why we get somebody like Pete Buttigieg, at his level. Compromise is the lifeblood of politics. The basest of men are pushed to the top. Why? It's because all they're interested in is in themselves. And they will quickly comply to the pressure of the conspiracy over them, meaning the number one at the top of all conspiracies will be Lucifer. Now, the Bible encourages us to be vigilant, to be sober, because your adversary, the devil, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And if you go into a city, you need to beware of the conspiracy of the gangs. Jesus warned his apostles about religious conspiracy. He said, beware of the wolves in sheep's clothing. He said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. He alerted Jeremiah of the political conspiracy, and he alerted Ezekiel of the religious conspiracy that bred the political conspiracy. This is why the Bible encourages you and I to prove all things and hold fast that which is good, and to try the Spirit, and not to fall under the fear of the conspiracy. And remember, as Amos revealed in Amos 7, that the conspirators will charge anyone who's exposing them to be in the conspiracy. A conspiracy also hides evidence of wrongdoing. Also, we have an example of that at the Supreme Court level, and one of them doesn't even know what a woman is. Okay, there's brothers out of Utah called the Brunson brothers, and they have filed a case and made it up to the Supreme Court. Got there in November, and they turned it down in November. It got again in January. They turned it down again in January, February. Now they're going for a third try. And these justices, and you can find it on the Supreme Court website. It's 22-380. You just type in Supreme Court, look up the docket number, 22-380. And you can see the last I checked it said it was denied a hearing or a rehearing. It's my understanding they might get a third shot at it, but I'm not sure. But if these judges do not consider this case of fraud in the election, then their conspiracy will be guilty of a violation of their oath of office, and they will commit the crime of misprision, which is the deliberate concealment of one's knowledge of a crime, where they were given knowledge of the crime or the accusation of the crime of election fraud. Now, Paul has encouraged us to be more than conquerors. Another way of saying that is don't become a victim. Now, of course, we all have been victims of the conspiracies because the conspiracies are unlimited in this day. But if we can at least try to be a conqueror of ones that the Lord allows us to be conquerors of, and the first thing we need to do is conquer the fear and intimidation. In Isaiah chapter 8, and again, the Bible just simply amazes me how not only up to date it is, but how advanced it is. In Isaiah chapter 8, Isaiah wrote in verse 10, "Take counsel together, and it shall come to naught." So that would be the conspirators. The Lord is mocking them. He says, go ahead and take counsel together, and it shall come to naught. Speak the word, and it shall not stand. For God is with us. And then he says, "For the Lord spake thus to me with a strong hand." Okay, Isaiah, one man. "And instructed me that I should not walk in the way of this people, saying, Say ye not a confederacy. To all them to whom this people shall say a confederacy, neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid." So Isaiah, the Lord told Isaiah, don't walk in their way. Okay, so if you go back to the COVID narrative, okay, the media relentlessly put fear in front of people. On occasion, you might see a soundbite or a graphic like this, where the CDC reported that the survival rate of COVID was 99.998%. Why would you have fear and take a vaccine when you have a 99.998% recovery rate? I mean, right there, you can see a conspiracy theory quickly becomes a fact. It's like, why should I fear something like that? Okay, the narrative stated the majority of people have a 99.99% recovery rate. Why would you fearfully take a vaccine? Unless they wouldn't let you visit your loved one, okay, in a nursing home. And what a dirty trick that is. But in reality, 99%, probably that high rate, were motivated by fear and intimidation to get the jab. In Isaiah chapter 8, verse 13, he says this. Okay, in verse 12, he said, "Neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid. Sanctify the Lord of hosts himself, and let him be your fear, and let him be your dread." So there's the alternative the Bible gives us. In Psalm 1 verse 1, it says, "Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly." Okay, now it's a conspiracy theory to report that to report a vaccine injury or death. Okay, so now that's a conspiracy theory. And how soon will one discover that many of these injuries and in many cases death have occurred because of the vaccine? I mean, common sense reveals that if you put something toxic in your body, it is not going to be the benefit of your body. Fortunately, if you were one of those that took the jab, I would encourage you to get online and discover ways of cleansing that out of your system. In 1 Peter chapter 3, if you look at the Bible doctrinally, this is advice that will be given to people of the tribulation time period. But it's good advice for us also in this day, where in 1 Peter 3:14 it says, "But, and if ye suffer for righteousness' sake, happy are ye, and be not afraid of their terror." Okay, George Bush #2 made that word a political popular word, terrorism. And then the Bible says, "Neither be troubled, but," just like Isaiah said, "sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that's in you with meekness and fear." So I would encourage, as Paul wants you and I to be more than conquerors, and not to become a victim of these multiple conspiracies. To be more than a conqueror, one needs to realize that you plus God equal a majority. Elijah was a man who stood against the religious conspiracy under Jezebel. One man. You plus God equal a majority. When Elijah stood up against 450 Jezebel prophets, 400 false prophets, so 850 false prophets, the odds were unfair because Elijah had God on his side. Proverbs 28, verse 2, gives an absolute rule about governing structures, be they political corporations or be they governing structures themselves. And by the size of the governing structures, you know one thing. Proverbs 28, verse 2, it says, "For the transgression of a land, many are the princes thereof." Big government reveals big sin. And then it says this, "But by a man of understanding, like the children of Issachar, and knowledge, the state thereof shall be prolonged." So I would strongly encourage you to overcome the fear of these conspiracies. Sit back, pray, and ask God to guide you so that you can not be a victim of these conspiracies, but you can be a conqueror, and you can conquer the fear and intimidation in order to walk with your holy God.